This is going to be a gas.
Hi, everybody. It's Dirkbag.com radio. I am Dirk. My friends call me Dirkbag. Today, we're going to be talking to musician, singer, producer, writer, director, and filmmaker Mark W. Curran, a true Renaissance man. Stay right there. It's Dirkbag.com radio. Dirkbag.com! Dirkbag here, and I'm very happy to have on my show Mark W. Curran. Welcome.
Thank you, Dirk. It's great to be with you.
Look, you and I have known each other for a long time. We have a business relationship going on, and so I think it's fair to say that up front. But also, I think you're generally an interesting man, and you have your hands in a lot of stuff. And so I think the first question I want to ask you, and we'll get into the movie you've been working on right away, but I want to ask you first, how is it that you found yourself doing music and production and movies and voiceover and a bunch of stuff I'm not even listing?
A lot of people ask me that. They say, well, geez, you got so many things going on here, and how did you ever get into all these different, artistic modes? And I always answer that, well, back in the olden days of the Renaissance painters, these guys used to have their hands into all kinds of creative pies in terms of artistic expression. So I think from a very early age, I was always exploring new ways to express myself. So music was one of the first things that I came to that I really loved. I mean, growing up right outside of Philadelphia in a little suburban town, used to hear these radio broadcasts coming from WFIL in Philadelphia and the great Jerry Blavitt and some of these boss jocks that we used to call them. And they would play all this great music. I mean, I'm talking about from a very young age I began collecting records. And of course, when the Beatles came on the scene, as it captured so many millions of people, really captured my imagination as well. So, I was one of those baby boomers that was really affected greatly and inspired by the debut of the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show. So I would have to say that music was first, and these other modes of creative expression, such as writing, movies, writing plays, books, all that kind of stuff, just sort of followed suit. And I guess I could say that for a lot of creative people, many can change lanes or change modes kind of quickly. And once you open up that creative self inside, you can sort of express yourself in so many different ways, and that's just exactly, I think, what I've done.
Now, I want to mention something because you talked about boss jocks. Out here in Los Angeles, we had Boss Radio 93 KHJ, and we had the boss jocks out here. Now, when I was a kid, I thought we had boss jocks, and I had no idea that they had, basically, they had boss jocks in every major city across the country. And
yes.
We like to talk about how music radio has become so corporate that, if you listen to a classic rock station or an oldies station here in Los Angeles, and you go to Dallas or you go to Minneapolis or you go to Philadelphia, like you mentioned, the classic rock station is going to sound almost exactly the same. And
yes.
And the talk radio stations and the news stations, and it's all very formatted. Well, perhaps loosely so at the time, back in the early 60s, I think that it was still kind of formatted, even though the music was much more integrated at the time. You had country and pop and rock and metal and hard rock and everything, rhythm and blues, soul. It was all together on one station in the top 40, and it's not like...
I mean, it was like a mix, like a wonderful stew.
Yeah.
And it wasn't controlled by by the corporate powers that be, but the radio station manager or the program manager could have free reign to use his creative abilities to be able to pick that music, and that really influenced an awful lot of musicians and even other radio personalities as a result. But it's not like that anymore, as you know.
Back then, you could even have an artist in Philadelphia somehow get his 45 in the hands of that guy. Mention his name again. The boss.
Jerry Blavat.
Yeah, you could somehow get that in the hands of the boss jock, and if he liked it, he'd play it.
Well, yeah, that's how Elvis got launched. I mean, they just took the record down to Dewey Phillips, and he spun it a bunch of times, and there you go. But anymore, you can't do that.
No.
And it's really sad what it's really put a damper on creativity, and it's really put a damper on the music business. And I fear that the same thing is happening with the movie business as well, especially with all the piracy going on. And, not only do you have the corporate powers that be controlling the creative end of it and trying to make everything into a business, then you've got, the pirates on the other end, who are even the end users now, who are downloading these movies and taking, royalties away from the people who put their hard-earned butts on the line to make those movies.
I've told people many times that when they download a free movie or a free book or free music, they are stealing from not just the artists, but all the other people who worked on that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it has far-reaching consequences, far and beyond what most people are aware of.
All right, so let's talk about your movie, because what you've done is pretty ambitious, I think. Tell us about the writing of the movie. I'll tell you what, let's start with the concept of the movie and how you got started writing it in the first place.
Well, actually, I've been involved in films off and on for quite a long time. Back when I was in my 20s, I was traveling with a musical group on the road, and I began to look into doing screenwriting as sort of a way to kind of pass the day. And because we would play at night, and we'd be basically in a hotel room all day, so I began to develop, did a lot of songwriting and things, but began to develop an interest in writing for television and film. Got a couple of books on it, and had always had a great love of the horror genre, particularly reading novels like Stephen King and a couple of the other horror novelists. Names kind of, of course, Edgar Allan Poe, but some of the more contemporary horror novelists. And I've always loved that genre. So I began to develop a story back then, which was a sort of a modern-day witchcraft story. And over the course of time, I'd written that into a screenplay and then into a novel, and subsequently decided to move out to Southern California to try my hand at filmmaking. So kind of fast forward, quite a few years went by. I tried to get that story and that screenplay packaged a number of different ways, trying to get investors and attaching star talent, getting producers involved, getting named directors involved, and even a few studios. And we were just never able to get it off the ground. And so I had sort of given up on the movie business for quite a few years. And as things have turned around in the movie business, at least in terms of the accessibility of the new digital cameras and lighting, whereas before it wasn't really accessible to someone that didn't have a lot of money, I was able to put together some loans on my credit cards and get some equipment and hire a crew and do some casting, and found a location and decided to start fresh with a whole new story. So I had to I only had one location that I could get for very little money, which was an old rundown medical clinic in downtown Los Angeles. And so I wrote a story around that location, and basically I didn't have a lot of money for cast, so I had to keep the cast very small, just a few characters. So what I did was I wrote a story about a young security guard who, left alone in a creepy, run-down medical clinic in the inner city, begins to realize that she's not alone in there by herself. She begins to be terrorized by supernatural forces, and then eventually uncovers a frightening and terrible secret from her shattered past. So you could say it's sort of the film contains all of the elements of a classic horror slasher film with more of an emphasis on suspense, much in the tradition of Hitchcock or Brian De Palma. And the name of the film is called Abandoned Dead.
Right, and now the Abandoned Dead are, well, you have to watch the film to know who they are.
Well, exactly. There's a lot of hidden meanings in there too. It's a film that really works on a lot of different levels. So it's one of those things where you'd sort of have to go. You can enjoy it first time through, and it really provides a lot of entertainment value. But there are a lot of hidden things going on. It's one of those things where you're going to go back and watch it, a second time or a third time, and begin to, piece together this little puzzle that's being put together, because it has a sort of it's a film noir thriller type thing. We've even got a sort of a little bit of a detective story that kind of weaves in and out of this film, and kind of leads you along and gives you clues as to what's happening, but you're never quite sure exactly what's happening to this girl, whether the things that are happening to her are imaginary or whether they're actually happening to someone else, and she is the one that's being imagined by someone else. So it really does deliver a lot of horror and suspense and surprise in kind of a unique and unusual style.
Now, I know you are you're completed with the filming and you're in post-production. Where along the way are you at this point?
Well, we're just about about the halfway point into the editing, and starting adding. We're going to be adding some special effects, some sound. We're going to be doing a little bit of ADR, which is the dialogue re-recording of some of the dialogue that we didn't get live on the set. We have the actors come back into the recording studio and actually do voiceovers of their lip sync. They actually try to line the dialogue up. It's a process called ADR, automatic dialogue recording. So we're going to be doing that, and then adding some special effects and some music.
Let me ask you something. That doing the voiceover thing sounds like you might one of the actors may repeat the line 10 times and never quite line up perfectly with what their mouth is doing.
Yeah, that's right. It's sort of tricky. It's
really
a bit
tough.
of a learned art.
Now, is that something that happens in most film?
Yes, quite a few films they'll get rid of all of the on-set production dialogue and have it all and just re-record everything.
Wow. But it's
pretty amazing.
And so you got to bring in
a lot of times you can't really tell.
You got to bring in your A-list actors into a studio and have them record voiceover to go with the film?
Yes.
Wow.
The same actors that you had in the film will be the ones. I don't it's interesting when you mentioned about the A-list actors. I kind of wonder, maybe some of these A-list actors have voice doubles that'll come in. I don't know if they do that or not, but
it makes you wonder. Because I always wondered how you could have a couple of guys out on top of, say, a parking garage, and you've got a long shot, so you can see mostly parking garage, and you see a couple of guys walking, and they're relatively small on the screen, and you got no microphone anywhere, and they're talking, and you can hear them just as if they're right up front on the microphone.
Well, that can also be done live as well, because they've got little radio mics on. So you can generally they'll always record the dialogue anyway.
Yeah, because I remember
a radio mic on, and your sound mixer will mix that. But how far up or back it is in the mix, as opposed to where they are in distance on the screen, is all really arbitrary.
Well, and I remember television shows you watch from back in the 70s, and you'll see a couple of people driving away in a car down PCH from an aerial view, and the two voices sound like they are sitting in a studio, so you know that it was voiced over.
Oh, yeah. Exactly. Yeah, sure.
So, editing. What do you think about editing? Is that a laborious process?
Yeah, editing is a very laborious process. I don't edit myself, but it's probably the most time-consuming and difficult part of making a film, because there's so much that really goes into it, and it isn't just the editing of the pictures or the moving pictures. It's also a process of adding and putting in sound effects. Doors closing, people walking down the hall. There's all kinds of things that you really don't really get on the set that you kind of have to add later. Or other times, let's say you have a door closing, you would record that in close-up of that, and then you would actually drop that sound in during the editing process so that it's louder and more pronounced.
Or because some doors, when they close, don't have the sound that you're looking for.
Yeah, most doors won't. You want to have a nice, especially in a horror movie, you want to have these big, creaky, heavy doors, closing. You want to have a lot of emphasis. So, well, it's quite an art, the editing. Yes, I'm not really one skill I don't have.
Well, that's fine. I want to ask you though: have you seen some of the edited material?
Oh, yes. The edited material thus far looks very good.
Oh, good. Okay.
Our cameraman is also, our director of photography is also editing the film.
We should mention his name. Why don't you mention some of the names here? Because if they hear this interview and you don't mention any names, they're going to be ticked off.
As they should be, because they contributed everything to this. Well, our director of photography and camera operator, as well as our editor and the person that's writing the score, is Robert Adams. He's a very talented young guy out of San Pedro, and he's been really a wonderful collaborator on this project. And we had quite a few crew people. It's hard to mention everybody, but I maybe just give you a little idea of the cast. We have in our lead role an actress named Sarah Nicklin, who's been in a number of small-budget features over the course of her short time being an actress. She's only 24 years old, and she's been in maybe 8 or 9 movies so far. And then we've got Robert Wilhelm, who is playing a mad doctor. He's been in a couple of TV shows. Not a great deal of experience, but not a lot of film experience, but quite a bit of stage experience. And we also have Christopher Parker. We have Stacy Snyder, Jack Stafford, and a great young actress who played the young Rachel Burke, the child version of our lead actress, Hannah Johnson. And
how old is she?
Hannah's only 8.
Okay, did you have to have her folks there on the set when she's working, or did you have to?
Yes,
I know there's a lot of
accompanied her.
There's a lot of rules you got to obey when you have child actors, right?
There are definitely a lot of rules and regulations but basically she kind of kept everything moving along quite well, and she kept she kept her daughter in tip-top shape and ready for her scenes. So it was very cool.
All right.
And then we also have our star, or our star turn was Judith O'Dea from Night of the Living Dead. George A. Romero's original Night of the Living Dead. She played Barbara back then in 1969. She played the lead role in that. If you remember, the blonde-haired girl that was trapped in the farmhouse with the black guy. So that was quite an amazing thing. You know, to this day, that's still a popular cult film.
Yeah. The black guy in Night of the Living Dead. Everybody knows exactly what you're talking about. Nobody knows his name. It's the black guy.
Right, the black guy. And George Romero, you know, was like one of the first directors, you know, to put a white girl and a black guy together.
I remember that, yeah.
On screen. Yeah. So I thought that was kind of cool, you know, that but she's a wonderful actress, and she was really great. We flew her out from Arizona, and she just did a wonderful job. And in fact, she's helping us, you know, publicize the film. And of course, when it's finally edited, we're going to make the rounds of all of the film festivals, and then once we do that, once that's done, then we'll premiere it here in Los Angeles. Our plan right now is to open it theatrically for 1 week here in L.A., but I don't know exactly what that date is going to be yet. So
yeah, that's fine. I was going to ask you
for that.
Before we move on to talk about your music, where can people go to keep up on when this movie is going to come out, Abandoned Dead?
Well, they can go right down to their local internet browser, and they can go to abandoned/dead. No, it's not a slash. I guess it's a dash. I don't even know my terminology.
Yeah, you're pretty good with the internet stuff.
Yeah. it's abandoned-dead.com.
All right. And what's the Facebook page?
The Facebook page is, you know what?
That's going to be facebook.com/
I'll
tell you what,
Abandoned Dead Movie.
Okay, yeah, all you got to do if you want to find it, and none of this description of how to find it made any sense, go to Facebook and search.
Yep.
Go to Facebook and search for Abandoned Dead Movie, or simply type in Google Abandoned Dead, and you're sure to find it. All right.
And there you can see, a trailer of the film, and you can get a little background on the thing. And really, if you like suspense thrillers mixed with horror and that film noir style, I think you're going to really enjoy this film.
All right. Now, talking about music, what is your favorite music to perform?
My personal favorite.
Because I'm sorry. Let's back up. Talk a little bit about all the different kinds of music that you have performed. I know you've done the big band stuff, and you've done some doo-wop stuff, and it kind of lists through some of the things that you've done on stage performing.
Well, I've done a lot of different kinds of music. As you say, I've done. I was actually put together a tribute group doing the very best of the 50s and 60s. That was a show called Shake, Rattle, and Roll, in which I performed various star performers from the 60s, which included Elvis, Jerry Lee Lewis, the Beach Boys, the Beatles. We did a sort of a whole like a review show. I've done Simon and Garfunkel, I've done Crosby, Stills, and Nash tributes, and then got into a really interesting thing with big band music, where I had a full big band backing me, singing some of the great hits of Bobby Darin and Frank Sinatra. And I'd have to say that that's probably one of my most favorite things to perform on stage, which are the standards, the Great American Songbook, the standards that were recorded by some of the great singers like Sammy Davis Jr., Dean Martin, Andy Williams, of course Sinatra, all this stuff that still today resonates and still is great as it was when it came out. It's not as popular. Radio doesn't really play this stuff anymore, but for me, my personal favorite is that stuff.
Yeah, and I think the reason for that is because the songs were so great.
Oh yeah, the songs back then. The song was the thing, and the composers and the lyricists of that day were just the best you could get.
Yeah, and the lyrics. If you really sit down and read the lyrics, and it's fun to go to Google and look up song lyrics and just read the lyrics, and the lyrics themselves, the print on the page is actually musical in itself.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, when you get into things like the Cy Coleman stuff, or the Cole Porter, some of those lyrics, Sammy Kahn, some of those lyricists were just amazing. I mean, these guys came out of the Tin Pan Alley tradition and the Broadway tradition, so it was really a whole different thing. And what a glorious time it was. The 50s and the 60s, really the golden age of the Great American Songbook.
Now, do you get a chance to perform very often these days?
No, not these days. I have not been doing a lot of performing. I've been taking really more time with working with the movie. Just really kind of focused on that right now, but yet continue to run the Cruise and Oldies concerts business, where I'll book tribute acts, tribute artists from mostly the Southern California, Northern California region into performing arts centers and small theaters throughout the state.
Now, what do you think of pop music today? Because, I watch some of the programs that come on television just because I like to see what's selling, and I like to see who the artists are. I'm not even going to get into hippity hop and some of the stuff that I have such disregard for, but pop music and the really popular top 40 radio. What is your general opinion of where music is today, and how far different it is from the great music that we all grew up with in the 60s and the 70s?
Well, I think it's all informed by what the supply chain is, and the distribution chain. It supply and demand and distribution always drive the art, at least if it's commercial art. And so I think that artists are really now, more than they were back then, really forced to kind of create music that is commercially viable, meaning that it has to sound like music that's already been proven to be commercially successful.
Yeah.
So it's more of a copycat kind of a situation. It's very hard to get a lot of originality in that scenario when you've got everything gone corporate. I mean, I sort of see the music business as sort of the same thing that happened in Las Vegas, where you had independently run casinos. Granted they were run by the mob, but you had individual creativity going on there, and the artists that played those venues were basically were performing with a great sense of originality and style. But nowadays, now that the corporations have taken over, now all you see are sports rooms, sports betting, and big giant circus shows, and that's about it. So I think
well, you got your Britney, what's her name? Okay, Britney Spears has a Vegas show, and Celine Dion has a Vegas show, but it's not the same. It's not the same like what you're talking about.
No, and I guess audiences have changed too. It's hard. It's really hard to say. I mean, could you really? We could probably never go back to the way it was. I mean, if you put those kind of artists in Las Vegas now, they probably wouldn't get an audience because people, the younger people of today, the young spenders, so to speak, they're probably not going to want to come and see the standard, the Frank Sinatra type of singer. So
and if you did have a showroom type of Frank Sinatra with a big band, you would end up with a room full of geezers watching the show.
Yeah, well,
you just would
either have a. Yeah, you probably wouldn't have the spenders is what the powers that be would tell you. But I don't know. See, art and commerce never were a very good mix. So I think you'll always run into a conflict there. I think back in the 60s, you didn't have as much of a conflict between art and commerce. People could create freely, and they could, like you said, they could put it on a record and take it down to the local radio station, and but as soon as the big money comes in, everything changes.
Record companies used to give an artist like I don't know, Yes or Genesis or Pink Floyd a year or more to work on an album, and they paid for all the studio time. And that's just not going to happen today.
Time to find their legs and find an audience, but there's just too much money involved in that now, and of course there's really no radio anymore like there was. So, the record companies themselves are up against it. They've got people. The moment that these record companies put something out, it's automatically downloaded by all these people, and there's no generation of income.
Do you think the ability to download individual tracks has helped or hurt music creativity?
Well,
see, the questions get harder.
I think it's hurt it.
Mark,
I do.
I want to point out something. The questions get harder as we go along.
Well, that's fine. No, it's a good question. It's sort of a chicken and the egg kind of a question, because you kind of wonder if the artists are creating this material not from the bottom of their heart and from their inner creative soul, but they're creating this music to try to please the corporate executives, or to try to get a record deal, or to try to please those for whom they have a record deal. So it's very hard to say, but regardless of the genesis of the music, once they put it out, and it gets put out, and if people are downloading it for free, then I think it hurts the artist, and I think it certainly hurts the record company too.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not even considering the the downloads for free. I'm talking about buying tracks individually instead of a whole album. Let me illustrate this a bit, because I'm going to pick an artist. It could be any artist, and anyone out there listening may pick a different artist, but I'm going to pick one, Stevie Wonder. And somebody like Stevie Wonder would go into the studio, and he's got in mind a number of songs he's going to do. It doesn't have to be a concept album like The Who's Quadrophenia or something, but the album, the construction and the composing and the arranging and putting the tracks, the songs in a certain order was all part of putting together an album. And people bought that album. Sure, you might have something like Boogie on Reggae Woman that becomes a 45 single, and it gets released and it gets played on the radio, and that becomes the single on Top 40. But people were still going out to buy the whole album, because they knew that Stevie Wonder was an artist with a great reputation, and the new Stevie Wonder album came out, and people who bought the last two or three of them immediately went to Licorice Pizza or The Warehouse or Tower Records. All of them are gone now, I think. And they would buy the album having not heard any of it. Now, today, I think, and this is my opinion, I think that the ability to go on iTunes and pick, like, say, I want to get Boogie on Reggae Woman, and I want to get a couple of the other ones I heard on the radio, and to hell with the rest of the album. I think that's hurting music creativity.
Well, it's certainly hurting creativity, but the big problem that you have now, and it's getting worse, and I don't think it's ever going to get better, is that people's attention spans have gotten, so short that, everything has to be done in quick, everything is made to order. Television shows are made to order. When the people don't wait for it to, show up on their TV. They set their recorders and they say, okay, I want to zip through the commercials. I want to watch this on my iPhone. If an album comes out, look, I don't want to listen to the whole album. I just want to listen to this one track, or I don't want to buy a whole album just for the one track that I like. So I guess it's good that consumers have choices like that, and I think that's good. but I think that you're right, from the artistic point of view, that these songs were created to be grouped together in one whole work, and I think that, they should be listened to as one whole creative work rather than having all these individual tracks available. But I don't think you'll ever see that happen. I don't think you'll ever see it go back to the way it was.
Those were great days when...
yes, they were.
I remember...
Those were the days, Sheriff Dirk.
Yeah, those were the days. Mark, I remember way back when I was...
way back when we was kids.
When I was riding my bike through 16 feet of snow to get the latest album. But I do remember riding my bike to get the latest album that came out, and I heard that it was going to be released. And so I'd ride my bike to the record store, I'd buy the album, I'd ride my bike back with the album under my arm, and I'd go into my bedroom and put on the headphones and put on the album and open up the whole, it was a fold-out 24 inches by 12 inches of artwork and lyrics.
Geez, the unwrapping, it was the ritual,
Yeah, and it's gone now. I think one thing that might help bring a resurgence to creativity in music would be for an artist to be so confident in their music that they don't allow individual tracks to be sold except for whatever the single is. But that's not going to happen today. No record company is going to say, "Oh, okay, we'll just sell it as one album package."
Well, you really wonder what's going to happen to the music and film business, because we've got such a problem now with piracy, and people don't really see the value. They believe that music should be free and that movies should be free, and
And see, I've never understood that. Never understood that kind of thinking, because the creative art process, the material that an artist comes up with, that artist and the people who produced it, the people who engineered it, and the people who made it available, the record company made it available for purchase, they all deserve to be compensated for all the work that went into putting that music out.
Oh, they do, but people just don't care. I mean, they don't see that. They don't see it. All they know is, hey, look, I'm getting this stuff for free, or my friend gave me this for free. Eventually, you get to if you're of the new generation and you don't remember the things that we did and came to appreciate the value of all those things, all they know is, hey, I just want to grab it for free. I'm not going to buy it.
I just want to crank it up in the car. Gimme.
Yeah, and it is really all a lot of gimme. So really, I remember reading somewhere where they talked about how the model was back in the Renaissance days, when these painters were doing things in Italy, how those guys were capitalized. They didn't really make money off of selling the paintings. They were commissioned by rich patrons, and we've sort of seen that with the crowdfunding stuff that cropped up, and I thought there was going to really be a great potential for that. And there was for a couple of years. It looked like some really good creativity, some really good creative people, and bands, filmmakers, writers, photographers, you name it, inventors, were all able to get their ideas capitalized by not investors looking to make money back on it, but by patrons who would give a little bit of money, $2, $3, $4 maybe.
Sure.
But now that whole model has been overused, and so it's now to the point where a person wants to make a film, they've tried to put a crowdfunding campaign together, and nobody wants to contribute because there's just so many of them out there now.
Well, look, before we close off, I want to talk about one more thing and get your thoughts on what I think is quickly becoming a powerful industry, and that is the tribute band community. I have seen just here in Los Angeles, and I know it's happening in other cities all across the country, I have seen tribute bands go from playing, I'm not going to name the clubs because I don't want to insult anybody, but real dives. The first couple of shows I went to see tribute bands were in dives. just awful little music clubs that had, only one PA speaker was working, and the lights were so dim about the power of candlelight. So, and then in the last, I don't know, however many years I've been going to shows, call it 10 years. Now these bands are filling 2,000 and 3,000 seat theaters without any problem. So,
right.
And if you ask me, and I'm now talking, for those of you who are listening, I'm talking to a man who produces many tribute band concerts. If you ask me, this is going to be doing nothing but growing bigger and bigger, because many of these artists are too old to play, if they're even alive still. And there is still a market for this music, classic rock music especially. There are many parents who love taking their kids to see a band play Led Zeppelin, Queen, Pink Floyd, whatever. It doesn't matter. And I think that this is still only the beginning of where this is going. Because I'm going to say one more thing. It's called classic rock for a reason. It's becoming like classical music. And I think 50 years from now, when I'm long gone, well, 50, yeah, I'm going to be long gone. 50 years, 60 years, 75 years from now, there are going to be bands playing this classic rock music because it's that good.
There's a very good chance you might be right about the music lasting 50, 60 years, because it was a Renaissance period, and the music that came out of the 50s and 60s was so incredible, and even into the 70s, which isn't to discount the music that came after, but that stuff, to us has become classics, and to people of our generation, as well as to the children of people of our generation, because they're parents are, as you say, passing it on to the kids, and the kids are kind of discovering this for the first time. So, and much like the way the rock musicians rediscovered the blues back in the the 50s and 60s, which gave rise to rock and roll. But I do really think that there could be a great growth period for tribute groups, if for no other reason than the sad fact that it's hard for any groups to get a foothold like they used to back in the 50s and 60s to have a tribute paid to them, to ever get popular enough to be given a chance to release enough albums to find an audience, to be able to build an audience to the point where that they're being paid tribute to.
Well, it's also
you don't have that kind of radio anymore. There's just the radio business is gone.
Right.
The record business is just about gone. You got Sony and a couple of other big players out there, and you're only going to hear what they want you to hear at this point. So, all we have left now are the great classic groups like the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd, and all these people really hunger to hear that stuff, particularly presented in a theater where the lighting is good and the sound is great and you're in a theater environment with other people who are enjoying it. I think that's how these groups need to be enjoyed.
Yeah, and music has always been more powerful live. You can listen
to a communal experience.
You can listen to a piece by Mozart on a record or a CD, but if you go to a theater and you see an orchestra perform it live, it can move you to tears. And I think that
absolutely.
When you go to a theater and you see a band play music from Houses of the Holy or Physical Graffiti, that is so powerful, and and you cannot get that even from a live recording of Led Zeppelin from back in the 70s.
Oh, very true. And more and more people are moving toward, in-home entertainment is getting really sophisticated, and I think what you're going to see in the future, and not too far into the distant future, is wholly immersive, interactive virtual experiences where people will be able to be almost as if they're sitting in a theater and seeing and hearing, even with better visual, with better clarity, better sound, better everything that they would actually get in the real thing. But
what else they're going to be able to do? Another thing they're going to be another thing coming very fast. They're going to be able to do. They're going to be able to pick up a electronic device guitar. An electronic device styled guitar, and they're going to be able to put on a headset and helmet, and they're going to be able to stand on stage with the tribute band and play for an audience.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I think all these things are quickly coming. And, it'll be a wonderful experience. I mean, I look forward to the virtual experiences as well. And, I embrace new technologies as well. And I think that there's a place for everything, particularly, as you say, the tribute groups. I think there is definitely a place and a market and a potential growth for live shows with tribute shows such as the ones that we've mentioned, as well as future tribute shows from groups we haven't even heard of yet.
Well, and who do you think that, there's got to be some artists out there that have not been set up yet by a tribute band, but could be. And there's not that many of them because, to be honest, one of my favorite bands as I was growing up was Uriah Heep. And if you set up an excellent tribute to Uriah Heep, it's not going to take off like some of the tribute bands with Queen and Pink Floyd, because the popularity and the notoriety of Uriah Heep is just not up there. And so there are a lot of bands that'll never really happen. And one of the crossover things that's happening, I think, and it's really pretty amazing, is that some of these musicians and singers from tribute bands are being picked up by the bands. The guy who was singing in Roundabout, a tribute to Yes, he's now the lead singer with Yes.
Oh, my. I didn't hear about it. I heard about the guy in Boston because I know that guy.
Yep. That's another
David one. David Victor was picked up by, he was in a Boston tribute, and he was picked up by Tom Schultz in the real Boston. He's now the lead singer of Boston.
Yeah, I'm going to look up this guy's name because I'm doing him a disservice. His name is John Davison. And he was the lead singer with Roundabout. I saw them play. I took some pictures, in fact, down in San Diego at the House of Blues, and they were a great band. And they're not a band anymore because their singer was so good. He was picked up by Yes. Wow. I guess John Anderson can't do it anymore.
Arnel, the guy from the Filipino guy, the guy that got Journey, who won Journey. Remember, Arnel Pinata or I can't think of what.
Yeah, what's the name of that band? Name. What's the name of that Journey band?
The name of the group? Oh, Journey. Yeah, it was Journey. He's doing the Steve Perry part in Journey now, and he just amazing. In fact, they made a documentary about that, and his name is Arnel, and it followed his journey from living in this little hovel and living in poverty in the Philippines and being discovered on YouTube by Journey, who were looking for a new singer. And
you're talking about Arnel Pineda.
Yes, Arnel Pineda. That's exactly it. And boy, he's wonderful. He
and that's
made
so
a documentary
demanding.
About it. Really a good thing. I don't know what the name of it is. Oh, it's the name of the documentary is "Don't Stop Believing."
Steve Perry has such a powerful voice, and he can soar like few in rock music have ever done. These soaring, high-pitched lead vocals, and to be able to recreate that is really amazing.
Oh, and imagine his surprise. I mean, he was saying, I have to pinch myself. I just can't believe it. He gets picked up to be the lead singer for the group, and they made him a full partner in the group as well in the business. Yeah,
that doesn't happen very often.
No, it sure doesn't.
Because what's his name? I'm terrible with names, but the fellow who's playing bass with the Rolling Stones has never been made a member of the Rolling Stones.
Bill Wyman?
No. Bill Wyman's long retired.
Oh, okay. There's another guy playing. See, I didn't know that. I thought Wyman was still playing with him. Tells you what I know.
Yeah.
I don't really follow it that much,
No, that's.
I'm so busy creating my own great music. I just don't have time for the Rolling Stones.
That's true. Well, I've been talking with Mark W. Curran, and his movie is Abandoned Dead, and you can find it if you want to do a Google search for Abandoned Dead, or it's on Facebook at Abandoned Dead /Abandoned Dead Movie. Facebook.com/Abandoned Dead Movie. And Mark, I want to thank you very much for coming on the show.
thanks, Dirk. I really appreciate it. It was fun.
It was fun. And you're listening to the dirkbag.com radio show. I'm Dirk Bag, and we'll talk again.
Amen, and a boom shakalaka go right there.